Hello, my name is Lou Johnson and I'm a motorsport photographer. I worked within motorsport for about 3.5, 4 years now in a variety of different race series, from British race series such as British GT to international series such as the World Endurance Championship and Formula E. Pretty much the first question that anybody asks me when they find out what I do is why? Why motorsport? How did that happen? And really, there isn't really a simple answer to it really. I grew up within motorsport. My dad and my mum both loved motorsport, and my dad worked for Audi as a general manager, which sort of meant that a lot of our kind of weekends were spent either at a car showroom, and I would be helping my dad drive the cars in and out of the showroom, or they were spent at racetracks, either at the hospitality section, or sat in the back of the car watching racing while eating this massive baguette or something like that. Like, it was always about racing. So it's almost not surprising that racing has always been one of my loves. I discovered photography when I was about 15. I was given a little point and shoot camera just before I went on holiday once, and it sort of dominated the entire holiday, me learning how to use the camera, and it sort of stuck from there really. It wasn't long until I convinced my parents to buy me my first DSLR, which was a Nikon D70S, which I still have somewhere. I love it to pieces. It was a great camera back in the day. Yeah, and I don't think I ever really put it down. I was constantly learning new things about photography, taking my camera to any sort of day trip, whether it be a motorsport event or a trip to London or anything. My camera came with me. So just sort of stuck. And the idea that I started combining the two, motorsport and photography, sort of just evolved, putting the two passions together and realizing that maybe one day, maybe I could do that. Maybe that could be my life. I could do that all the time. It was always sort of a pipe dream. I don't think I ever really considered that I would be able to do it. So I went to university, studied photography, and really sort of concentrated on developing my skills. Technically, working in the studio, learning a lot about that, but also getting to know what kind of photography I really liked too. When I left university, I did kind of the things that a lot of people do when they come out of art school, kind of got a job working in retail, and sort of continued to do photography at racetracks, but I was trying to push my my career, I guess, and I did that through accessible work that I could do. So event photography was sort of the closest I could get to motorsport. It was quite difficult as a girl in my young 20s to sort of know how to get into motorsport, and I didn't really assume that event photography would get me into motorsport really. That just sort of happened. So one day I got a call from Spacesuit Media, who are a photography agency that work within motorsport. And they had a contract that they needed some help fulfilling. They needed an additional photographer for a couple of rounds to shoot some hospitality for them. So event photography. And that's what I was doing. So they asked me to come along and shoot for them in both Paris and London that year. obviously I jumped at the opportunity, even though it was event photography and not specifically motorsport. It was within motorsport, and it felt like a proper step in the right direction for my motorsport career. And then fast forward a couple of months, and an opportunity arose within their track team. They had another position available, and they asked if I'd like to join them. And I haven't looked back. I've been a track photographer ever since. A lot of the work that I do over a Formula E weekend is very centred around the race team that I work for. I've been incredibly lucky to work with an amazing team for the last couple of years, Mahindra Racing. They've really kind of embraced me as part of their team and as part of their family, and actually that really helps my photography. So my race week starts very much sort of as the mechanics and the engineers' race week starts, which is documenting them building the car, building the garages, setting up for the weekend, getting those context shots and kind of documenting every element of the team. We get media days just before the race, where a lot of my job is kind of documenting the behind the scenes of what's going on, the drivers doing interviews, kind of trying to bring the audience that little bit closer to the race team. Documenting various different activations that they might do with the drivers. A couple of years ago, a driver jumped out of a plane, so I photographed the skydive. And a year or so ago, another driver was learning to box within Mexico, so I went along to that and I got to shoot that as well. It really is it's not just defined as being at the track. We get to take the drivers out. A lot of the racing that we do is within city centres, and it's great to be able to show that. So we do a lot of portraits, portraiture shoots, kind of showing the atmosphere of where we are in the centre of Santiago, the harbour in Monaco, anywhere that we can. The race day in Formula E is a little bit different to race day in other race series. In Formula E, everything happens in one day. In other race series, sometimes you get kind of a free practice day, and then a qualifying day, and then a race day, and everything's sort of spread out a little bit more than it is in Formula E. In Formula E, it all happens on the same day, which is so challenging as a photographer. In other race series, you might get to kind of shoot free practice 1 and free practice 2, and there might be a 2-hour gap in between, or the sessions might be, because of the nature of the racing. So for example, endurance racing, free practice is usually about an hour and a half, which really gives you a lot of time to work with the light, to get creative, to fulfill your brief and more. In Formula E, it happens at 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday and is 45 minutes long. The pressure is on. The gap between sessions is only maybe 2 hours, which means that actually once you start working on a Formula E race day, you sort of blink and it's over. We get up maybe at 4 a.m. in the morning, and you'll probably go to sleep at maybe 2 a.m. the next day, but it feels like you've only been up for an hour. Free practice 1 starts at 7:30 in the morning, and if you're really lucky, it's a clear day. And those clear, beautiful days where at 7:30 in the morning you get that morning light is something that is really special to Formula E. It's very rare, unless you're shooting a 24-hour race, that you get that beautiful morning crisp light within racing. Normally, the racing schedule is very much designed for the TV. So Formula 1 might be at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's when the TV audience is around. They probably wouldn't throw a session at 7:30 in the morning local time. But in Formula E, we have 7:30 in the morning FP1, 9:30, 10 a.m. free practice 2, qualifying around lunchtime. The turnaround for the images is incredibly fast. You can just about get back to the media centre. dump your cards, edit the pictures, get them to the race teams, and then head back out again. There's very little time to sit down. I do prefer to edit the images before the clients get them. It's certainly helped speed up my editing times. Because everything happens all in one day, there is definitely an added pressure to make sure that we cover everything that we can as a whole, making sure that I still get those shots of the drivers prepping to get in the car, those few moments that they get to themselves where they're kind of centralising their thoughts and focusing and prepping for that one crazy quali lap that hopefully is going to get them pole position is a real privilege to be able to see and to document. Shooting on the grid just before a race is possibly one of my favourite parts of my job. The atmosphere, the anticipation, the buzz that's in the air is just irreplaceable. And I love the challenge of capturing that, of capturing the drivers in their final stages of preparation, really starting to focus and get in the zone, to mechanics and engineers sheltering from the sun, doing final bits and pieces on the cars. It's a really wonderful thing to be a part of, and often where I get a lot of the shots that I feel I love from a weekend. Maybe one of the biggest challenges of the weekend is the race itself. It's always a bit of a balance between making sure that you capture the right level of kind of editorial race shots, kind of safe shots for sponsors and for drivers, to make sure that you capture all of the logos on the car and everything. But also you want to get creative. You want to try and see how slow you can pan, or see if you can capture the essence of where we are. If it's raining, how do you get the level of drama in those shots? And it's all while working in quite limiting conditions. You can't suddenly move to the other side of the track often unless there's a bridge. It's very much working with what you've got. There isn't always a photography window. You have to just jam your camera through the lens if you can, or try and get to an elevated position. You're constantly working, constantly thinking in your head how you can get the best of the situation, of where you are, of the lighting conditions, of the weather, all while remembering that you've only got 30 minutes now on the clock, or whatever else time there is, and following the race action to make sure that if your team win, you're right next to the podium, or you're in the garage where you need to be to get those reaction shots. It's a balance, and it's a challenge. I'm very lucky in my job to be able to travel to some incredible places. And I'm even luckier to be able to be in a situation where I can show those incredible places in some of the images that I take on a race day. Whether it be us racing round the streets of Paris or Monaco, to racing in Marrakesh with the mountains in the background. There are often some incredible places that we go to, and some incredible opportunities for something a little bit different when it comes to photography. So what kit do I use? Well, I wouldn't be without my D850 and my D800. Lens-wise, I shoot with a 24-70 and 70-200 lenses, both 2.8. And a 50mm 1.4. They are my absolute staples. The 50mm for most of my garage stuff, as well as my 24-70. It just kind of gives me the range. My 70-200 for all context shots on track, and also for my portraiture as well. Sometimes in some of the tracks where I'm a little bit further away from the action, or if there's a very long straight, I'll stick a ×2 teleconverter onto the 70-200. But I try and work with as little as possible, because they're really long days, and often my kit's on my back all day. So in the heat and the humidity of somewhere like China or New York in July, it's quite a lot to carry a lot of stuff around all day. So try and make it as simple as possible as a setup, and use the lenses to the best of the ability. So how do you plan to shoot a motorsport weekend? There's so much that's out of your control within a motorsport weekend. You know, as photographers, we're very much there to document what happens. We don't really get a say on when something happens, or, you know, if the podium or the grid is backlit or whatever. We don't get control over that. So the best thing you can do is to prepare. And that can start, whether it be Formula E or endurance racing, whatever it is, the best thing you can do is to start looking at the track map. Generally, before you get to a race, there will be a track map that's available. You may not, if it's a new track, be able to look at stills that other people have taken, or race footage from previous races, but there will be a way of looking at a diagram and working out where the sun will be, where it's east or west facing, and sort of getting a lie of the land. It helps to some extent, but it's never a replacement doing a track walk for doing a track walk. The drivers and the engineers do a track walk when they get there to whatever race it is, whatever racetrack it is. You'll always see the drivers walking, because while they do a lot of simulation, you have to make sure that your simulation is correct to what you see. And as a photographer, it's very similar. I can look at old race footage, I can look on Google Maps, I can do all of this, but actually none of it is a replacement to physically being there. And the most successful weekends I've had are weekends where I've been able to have the time. It's not always possible. Been able to have the time to walk the track and really look at where there might possibly be shots, where the light is. I wouldn't be without the app on my phone, which tells me where the sunrise is and where the light falls on the track. It's perfect. And it really helps you to work out, oh, okay, so this area of the track will probably get quite nice dappled light in the morning, so I'm going to go there for the first session. And it's all about working with the light that you're given. And also working out things like where there might be a crash, or where there might be race action that is possibly going to be significant to the weekend, and making sure that you're there to the best of your ability. I know that a lot of it is to do with luck and just being there at the right place at the right time, but you can make those chances a bit greater if you do a bit of homework beforehand. So that's generally how I prepare. In Formula E, often we're in brand new race circuits that we haven't raced before. So I might walk the track maybe every day as it evolves and it's being built right in front of me. I'm often kind of trying my best to work out even access. You know, how can I get from here to here? Can I cross the track at any point? What would the quickest way back to the media centre be? Is there a good aerial shot I can get? Teams love an aerial shot, and it can be incredibly difficult to get. There's not always bridges, or if there are bridges, you can't always shoot from them. So it's about doing a lot of planning for those shots and those sessions. But there's always an element of, well, you get there and you see what happens. A few years ago, I was in Saudi Arabia. It didn't look like it was going to rain. The forecast said it wasn't going to rain. I went out for the first session of the day and it rained so badly, to the point that the session was halted. And as a photographer, I have to try and react to, do I run back to the pit lane? Should I change the place that I'm going to be? You know, do I know the track well enough to know, or there might be a puddle here where I can get a really dramatic photo? It's all in the preparation, and reacting and having the confidence to react to the situations as they unfold in front of you. It's part of the challenge, and it's also part of the reason why I love my job. I've said that a lot, but I really do. I think you have to be okay with standing out in the snow, in the middle of a Belgian forest for World Endurance Championship, or to stand out in the blistering heat of Santiago. You have to really love what you do. Now, I mentioned that my job is very varied over a race weekend. Well, the same can be said on a non-race weekend as well. I often get asked to do a variety of different events for the team. For example, karting events that they might do with fans and with media, events that they might do like running the show car up the hill at Goodwood Festival of Speed, a whole variety of different things, which are always really fun. But also sometimes every year we're asked to shoot the new livery and the new car for the team, and that's a real privilege. Often they're very studio styled photos, statics that really highlight the new livery, any new sponsors or pre-existing sponsors, and then new details of the car. And while last year I got to do that, I also got to bring some creativity to the table as well. As part of my brief, Mahindra wanted to capture some light painting. They wanted us to kind of push the idea of this being an electric car, and they wanted to do that with some fibre optic lights. So we set about a very fun afternoon in the studio doing some light painting with big fibre optic cables, dragging them across the car, and trying to create some really special, electrifying images. This image is a composite of 6 different photographs, all long exposures, varying times, but between 10 to 15 seconds. For each exposure, I pulled fibre optic cables over different elements of the car to try and simulate airflow. I wanted to highlight the aerodynamics of the car to create movement, but also to do that with the fibre optic cables kind of gives it a sense of electricity. I'm really pleased with the end result, and we did a couple of different angles of the car, but this is definitely my favourite. A question I'm often asked is if I have any tips for any aspiring motorsport photographers or anyone who wants to improve their motorsport photography. I think the first thing I'd probably say is practice, 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 practice. Go out there and enjoy yourself and keep practicing your panning. You know, panning is such a difficult thing to do to start with, to kind of get your head around it, but actually once you start practicing, you can really push your panning to something, to kind of new levels, and to really create something quite dynamic. So some of the rules with panning, I would say, even the pros will do something very similar. I certainly do. Start with a safe pan, especially if you've not shot for a while or you've not done it for a while. Don't suddenly expect yourself to suddenly be able to shoot at 1/5 of a second. Even if you've been shooting a motorsport event the previous day, there is an element of getting your eye in and getting adjusted to it. So start off with trying to nail a pan of 1/25 of a second, you know, follow the car from literally before you take the shot, and then follow through afterwards as well. It'll really help give you that kind of really smooth moment. Know where the car's going to go, know the racing line, don't try and pan if the car's going away from you and expect a solid pan with straight lines behind you. The perspective isn't going to work like that. So plan your shot. Start with 125th of a second and then slowly slow it down until you can get to a 50th of a second, and then a 25th of a second, and then see if you can do a 10th of a second. Sometimes it's not always possible with the lay of the track or the angle that you're in. Also, another thing to try and do is to try and pan and add some colour to your images, especially on a grey British day. We get plenty of those at racetracks. pan through the crowd, pan through trees. There's plenty of colour out there, even when the sun doesn't provide the beautiful shadows that we might want. There are plenty of options. Never think that just because you don't have the access, you don't have the media accreditation or the pass to get the other side of the catch fence, that you can't take a great motorsport shot. More often than not, you're going to see a lot of pro photographers who are working for race teams actually in the fan areas, shooting through the fans or shooting through the trees or getting full atmosphere shots of the whole scene. Just because you don't have the access doesn't mean you can't take stunning shots. Sometimes you might even take better shots than us because you've got some time, because you're being creative, because you're not constricted by a troubling deadline or something like that, or a brief. You can just shoot freely. Use that as an ability, as a opportunity to really explore your creativity trackside and do something different. Get some elevation in your shots. Go up into the grandstands and get some more aerial looking shots. A lot of the shots that we get as motorsport photographers that have any sort of elevation in them are often from grandstands. Go use your access as best as you can, and I'm sure you're going to come up with some great shots. Focus on giving your race images context. Where's the race taking place? Are there any defining elements of the landscape or the weather or the racetrack itself? Is there a particular corner that is of interest to the race series or iconic to that racetrack? Focus on showing that in a creative way, but don't just focus on just the car. A photograph of a car perfectly in focus with some green in the background could have been taken at any racetrack. Show those, but within a collection and a set, show everything. Show the hill that is on the first corner, or if it's the townhouses of Paris, show where the race is happening. And lastly, don't be afraid to ask for advice. Get your work out there, get it shared with people, get it on social media or on your website, somewhere. If you're looking to improve your photography, or you're looking to maybe get into motorsport photography and you'd like to start maybe talking to clients or whatever, have an online gallery. It is so important these days that your work is accessible right there, right now, whenever they need it. And if they suddenly have a spare moment to look through some motorsport images, then the best thing you can do is make it readily available. I think there's only one more thing for me to say today, and that's thank you. Thank you to you for joining me today, and thank you to Wex for inviting me to be a part of their Women in Photography series. I hope that I've been insightful and helpful, and I've given you some insight into what it's like to be a photographer in the motorsport world. I'm going to stick around in the comments for a little bit if you want to ask me any questions. If you're watching this back at any point, or if you don't want to pop anything into the comments, please feel free to contact me on social media and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you.